Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how I made these key rings using one of the embroidery files from Creative Fabrica. So if you're an all access member, you can download these and use them for free. Each file is an individual file, so you download whichever initial you want. I downloaded an M, an E and an S because these are for my auntie and my cousin. I'm going to see them hopefully in a few days and I'm just going to take them with me. But the designer of these also does blank ones. So if you don't want to use this font, because this is how they come with the font already on, you can download a blank one and use a different font that you've got, in your machine. Or if you've got Embrilliance Essentials, you can bring the blank into there and put your own initial on, or a design, or whatever you want to do. These have all been made with the ScanNCut and my embroidery machine. The only piece of hand cutting involved in the whole of this project was me cutting my water soluble stabilizer to put in the hoop. That's the only hand cutting, no other hand cutting whatsoever. I fasten them with snaps. So if you want to see how to make the project, and I'll provide links and everything in the accompanying blog post, which will be over on my Apple Lover 53 website. Keep watching. So I'm just going to show you in Creative Fabrica where I got the design, and then I'm going to take it into Embrilliance Essentials. Now, I've already downloaded the letter S, the letter E and the letter M. And looking at the details here in the description, these are only small designs. It says that you can stitch them in a 4x4 hoop. So I'm going to open all three designs, but I'm going to try and stitch them all in my big hoop. So I've just got one of the letters opened here on screen, and you can see over here there's a big green download button, which is what I did for each one of these applique key fobs. And there are also some plain ones. So if you don't like the font that's included in the particular key fob, so each key fob has its own individual letter. So, there's A through Z. But if you don't like the font, this particular designer also provides a plain one, and then you could just put your own initial on it in your own font, but I'm just going to use it as it comes. I also just want to point out, when you download the file, it tells you here on the left the formats that it comes in. So on the files for each of these letters that I've just got stored on my desktop at the moment, there's an embroidery file for each one of these formats in each folder for each letter. But if you scroll a little bit further down, you'll see here there's a bit that says More Sewing Info PDF. I've found this a lot with Creative Fabrica. They don't appear to put the PDF in the folder with the stitch file. It's kind of listed separately. You can also find it as well if you become a member of Creative Fabrica. You can go to where it says My Account, and then from there you can go to My Downloads, and you'll be able to find everything you've downloaded, and with the stitch file is the PDF as well there. But for this particular instance, I'm just going to click on this and show you. So here are the instructions for this key fob. It looks pretty simple. There only appears to be 4 steps. So what I've done is I've hovered over this, and where the arrow is, I've downloaded it. And then once I had it downloaded, I dragged it into one of the folders. So I'm going to put them into Embrilliance Essentials first, because like I say, I want to try and stitch the 3 of them in one go. So I've got Embrilliance Essentials open. I'm going to double click on my first folder, and I'm going to find the PES design from this letter S folder, and I'm going to drop it into Embrilliance Essentials. So I'm just going to select it and move it out of the way. Then I'm going to open the second folder, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to find the letter E, PES, and drop that onto the screen and just move it out of the way for a minute, and then find the letter M, PES. These are the 3 initials that I want to stitch out. So you can see that they come in diagonally, and I am assuming that this is because they're for a 4x4 hoop and they probably fit better if they're positioned diagonally. But I just want to stitch them, you know, vertically. I'm going to select the first one and I'm going to type in -45, and that's put that in the orientation that I want now. So I'm going to select the second one and do the same, -45, and the last one, -45. So I've now got my 3 designs. I'm going to drag an imaginary box around them all to select them. I'm going to come up to this icon here at the top that's align and distribute, and I'm going to align them all up along the bottom and say apply and close. So I've now got them all lined up, and they look as though they're, you know, spaced apart okay, but I'm just going to use the arrow on my keyboard and just move this one over to the right and move this one over to the left, just to space them out a little bit more. If you look over here on the right hand side now, you'll see that I've got, I'll just minimize each of these boxes. So you'll see I've got 1, 2 and 3, and that's because I've got 3 designs on the mat. And then when I click on the arrow, if you're using Windows, yours might be a plus, you'll see that if I click on it, I've got the steps involved. So there's like 4 steps for each design. And then if you look down here at the bottom, I'll just try and bring this up a bit, you'll see I've got red, green, purple, blue. Then I've got red, green, purple, blue, and red, green, purple, blue. So if I left these as it is, and if I just go up to the Stitch Simulator and start the simulator, it would stitch the placement for the first one, then it would do the second step for the first design, then it would do the third, then it would do the fourth, and then it would go on to the next one. I'm going to colour sort them so it does each step all at once for each design. So step 1 for this, then go on to step 1 for this, and then go on to step 1 for this. Now you have to be careful when you're colour sorting. Not everything can be colour sorted, because sometimes in a design certain elements have to be on top of something else, or something has to be underneath something, so you can't necessarily always colour sort. But for this is just 3 simple key fobs, and colour sorting will make the process a lot easier. So I'm going to go up to the top of the page, and under utility I'm going to come down and go colour sort. That will bring up this window, and it says the design page has been reduced by 8 colour changes. So I'm going to say new view, and now when I look on the right hand side you can see I've only got 1 step, and when I expand it I've got step 1 for all 3, step 2 for all 3, step 3 and step 4. So that will just make it a lot easier, and you can see I've only got 4 colour swatches, 1 for each of the steps. So I'm going to save this Embrilliance file now, put it onto a USB stick, and then I'm going to go over into my craft room and I'm going to stitch this out. So if you want to see how this is going to work out, keep watching. But for now I'm going to go to the top of the page, I'm going to go to File, Save Stitch File, wait for the box to open up, highlight what's in the top here. At the moment it's saying mydesign.pes, so I'm just going to save it as SEM key fobs, put it on my desktop and save it as a PES file and save, and that will put the stitch file on my desktop, and then I can just drag it onto a USB stick and then take this over to my embroidery machine. Okay, so you've just seen me make the design and colour sort it in Embrilliance Essentials on my computer. So I've come into my craft room and I loaded the USB stick into my sewing machine, called up the design, and stitched out step 1, which is like the placement stitch on your stabilizer. And while I was doing that, I just thought to myself, why don't I try and get the ScanNCut to cut the fabric for me for the front and the back of these key rings? So I've done the fronts, but I just thought I'd show you how I did it in case you're new to the ScanNCut and you want to try out some fabric designs, or if you want to do applique and you don't know how to do it. I have got other videos on my channel where I've used applique in the past, but I don't think I've ever done applique for an in the hoop design where there's no hand cutting at all involved. So let me show you what I mean. So I've taken the USB stick out of my sewing machine, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. In the next step, I'll take you over to the machine and you'll see where I've got up to. And this will hopefully all make sense. So I've put the USB stick that's got the embroidery design that was in my sewing machine to stitch out step 1, and I've put it in my ScanNCut machine. So I'm going to go to retrieve data from USB stick. There's the PES design. I'm going to choose the flower. I'm going to say set, and I'm going to choose the middle option and then say OK. So that's going to put the 3 designs on the mat, and these designs that you can see here are the placement stitch, if you like, that I've already just stitched out on the embroidery machine. So this is like the first step in your in the hoop design. So I'm going to say set, and you can see them here. I'm going to go into edit, because what I want to do, I want to inflate the size of these so that the fabric is cut out ready for me to just place over the stitching and then carry on stitching. And then if this works out at the end, I won't have to do any hand cutting at all. So the 3 designs have come in, and you can see they've got 1 box around them. So that means they're grouped. So I'm going to go into object edit and ungroup them. Okay. And then I'm going to just say OK. I'm just going to select one of them. So I'm going to use the arrows. I'll start with the top one. It doesn't matter which, just so that hopefully you can see this on screen. Okay. So I've got the 3 designs that came off the USB stick in the PES format, and this will work for any PES applique file. I've got the first one selected. I'm going to go into object edit, and I want to make the size bigger, so I'm going to use the offset icon. Now by default it came in at 0.06. Let me show you. So what I did, I said OK, and then if I say OK again to get back to the arrows, when I click the arrows now, I don't know if you saw it, but it jumps to the offset. So if I click it again, it'll jump to the next pattern, then it'll jump to the next pattern, then it jumps to the original outline that came in, and then it jumps to the offset, which is what I want to keep. Okay. So basically what I did, I went back to these bottom 2, sent them to the bin, and then the inner one, the original one, you'll be able to see which one it is. I'm not sure how well you'll see this on screen. I'm trying to zoom in as much as I can, but I don't know whether you'll see it. But if I click the arrow now, that box jumps to the outside, so I know that's the offset that's selected. So the original one I want to get rid of. Okay, and basically what I did, I put a piece of printer paper onto my mat, and I asked it to cut that shape, which is the 0.06 inflated size. And I cut it, and this is what I got. Then I came over to my embroidery machine where I'd stitched out the 3 first steps of the design, and I brought my 0.06 cutout from the ScanNCut, and this will work because I tested it out on, the regular white tearaway stabilizer, but I'm using this wash away one. I've put 2 layers on my machine, because my thinking is, if I'm not gonna, if this works and this, you know, all stitches out, and I just take these out of the machine, I don't want to be trying to pull out tear away stabilizer from the inner edge of the front and back of this when there's hardly going to be anything for me to get hold of. So that's why I'm using a wash away, because I can just wet it and it should hopefully give me the clean edge that I'm looking for. Hopefully this will all make sense if it works out. But basically what I did, I got this. First of all, I put it on top, but that's no use because you can't see whether it's the right size or not. So I came to the bottom design, because that's the bit that's not in the hoop, and I took this and I held it underneath that stitch out. And yes, my ScanNCut piece is bigger, but it's very, very tight to the stitches. I came back to the ScanNCut, hit the home button, said yes, it's okay to delete all patterns, went to retrieve data from the USB stick, found the design again, chose the flower, set it on the mat, chose the second one, said okay, said set. By the way, you can ungroup it in that previous step, but it doesn't matter. Came to edit, object edit, ungroup, said okay, use the arrows to get to the top one, again, just because it was easier for me. Went to object edit, offset, and this time I took the offset up from the default that it came in at, which is what I've just shown you that I cut in copy paper, and I took it up to 0.12. Said okay, deleted this inner one again, so I'm just left with the outer one. I deleted the other two because I didn't need to cut them. This is only a test. So this is now 0.12 of an offset. And I cut it, and here it is. That's why it's got 12 on it. And I did exactly the same thing. Came over to the sewing machine, held it underneath, and you can see that now it's bigger. And that the distance from the stitches to the white piece of paper is what I would try and get if I was cutting it out. So kind of as close as I can to the stitching, but leaving some of the, in this case, I'm going to be using vinyl. Once I knew that the 0.12 was hopefully going to be the size I need to cut these, I went into object edit, to the addition button, said I want 3, and then what I did, I rotated the middle one 180 degrees and positioned them together like so, loaded up my mat with my vinyl, my sparkly vinyl, and cut them. So now I'm going to do exactly the same with the material I'm going to use for the backing. Now I'm going to try and use a faux leather. I don't know whether this is going to work or not. I don't know how well it's going to stick to this mat. But what I'm going to do is get a piece of masking tape and hold it down. I'm just going to zoom you out again now. So I've got my piece of black faux leather on this mat. I'm not sure whether it's big enough, but we'll soon find out. And I'm going to say, okay, 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 and do a background scan and start and let that go through and hope that this faux leather is stuck down enough on the mat. Should be, because it's hanging off at the bottom, so it should be okay. So now I'm going to bring in each one of these pieces, and they do look as though they're going to fit, so that's something. And I'm just going to position them quite close to kind of save on the material. I've got my rotary blade installed. That's what I cut the top layer with, so I'm just going to use the same one. So I'm going to say OK, select, cut and start, and just let this cut. Now I may speed up this bit because it says it's going to take 5 minutes. The rotary blade takes longer to cut. If this was just being cut with the normal blade, these would be cut in no time. Okay, so that's finished cutting. So once it had finished cutting the first time round, I lifted up a corner without unloading the mat, and I wasn't convinced it was cut all the way through. So I selected finish, and then I went to select cut, and I did start, and I cut it again. So now I look as though I can peel this back and it's all coming away fine. So I'm going to unload the mat, peel away this masking tape, and then peel away my faux leather. So I've now got my 3 pieces of faux leather, just changing the light a bit. So I've got my 3 pieces of faux leather, and I've got my 3 pieces of sparkly vinyl. This is fabric vinyl, it's not heat transfer vinyl. It has like a fabric backing on it, okay? So I've got those, so they're the fronts and the backs. Just gonna turn this hoop round this way. I've put a piece of white paper underneath just to protect my mat. So I should be on step 2 now of the design, which is to place this fabric over each one of these designs, and then it should stitch down. It should start to stitch the initial on, and then I need to take it out of the hoop, turn it over and put the backing on before I do the last bit. So I'm going to try and stick these down. I've no idea whether this is going to work with this being like water soluble. I'm going to try a fabric glue stick. I just need it kind of just held in place. It doesn't have to be, you know, fully stuck down, but hopefully enough to hold it in place for the embroidery machine to be able to tack it down. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to stick it down like this, and obviously if it holds, I'm going to flip it over and just make sure it looks as though it's positioned where I want it to. You could try, I've also got a can of 505 spray here because I wasn't sure whether this was going to work or not. So I'm going to position that over. I'm going to flip the hoop over, and I can see now that this isn't quite where I want it to be. So I'm going to try and maneuver it without, you know, affecting the stabilizer too much. Once I get them roughly where I need them to be, I can see that the stitching isn't centralised on that one. 505 might have been better, but my thinking was that the glue stick might give me a bit more wiggle room. So they look as though they're kind of roughly where I want them to be. I'm going to press it down, holding both sides of the design so that I'm not dislodging anything. So now I'm just going to give that a really good, I'm holding it down so to keep it firm and not moving it, but I'm just going to give it a good rub in the hope that that fabric glue stick will hold them in place. And now I'm going to put this back in the machine and hopefully see if it stitches out. So we'll find out if this is going to work or not. Okay, so I'm going to put the foot down and I'm going to see if I can take the speed down on my machine just for this step. So I'm going to go to the, so I just clicked on that piece of paper at the bottom. Speed, I'm going to take the speed down to 600. I'm going to close that window and then I'm back to where I was at step 2. Let's see what happens. I've got the foot down, I'm going to press start. And this should be doing the stitching again that it had done on the stabiliser. So tacking this vinyl down. Once these are tacked down, it should be okay. I could increase the speed. I've just slowed it down just in case I need to stop it quickly. Looks okay, but a little bit close to the edge, so there'll be more vinyl showing on that far top side than there is on this. But again, you know, it's an experiment. You've just got to try and get it right, haven't you, and make sure it's in the right place. What I could have done, I could have, instead of using a 0.12, I could have inflated it more. But I was trying to do it with like the minimal amount of space on the outside of the stitching. And I think it looks okay. It's just my placement. I mean, the principle works. Okay, so now it's going to go on to doing the initial on each of the 3 key fobs. So I'm going to go back to the piece of paper, and I'm going to take the speed back up now and go back. So I'm on step 3, which is the initials. So I'll try and leave the camera running, but the battery is looking very low. So I'll put the foot down and I'll start. And if the battery, you know, starts to die, I'll come back when it's finished. But basically what it's doing, it's just going to do the initial on each of the fobs. Then I'm going to need to, once it's stopped, take it out of the machine and put the backs on. So maybe I'll try 505 spray on the back. Okay, so that's step 3 done. So now it's a case of sticking the backings on and just stitching out the last step. So I'm going to take this out of the machine and take it back over to my other desk. So there you can see. So the middle one is the best placement from what I can see where the stitching is. This one could have been moved over a little bit more, and that one. But you know, this is the first time I've done something like this. One thing I would say as well is, obviously I've not made, you know, good enough space of the amount of space I've got in my hoop. This is my 8x12 hoop, but this is how the file came over that I sent over from In Brilliance Essentials, or I should say that I saved in Brilliance Essentials onto my USB stick. If you were making these as gifts and you needed, you know, to do several of them, or you were making them to sell, you could get a lot more than 3 in a hoop this size. But that's just something to bear in mind. But you know, obviously this was just how I did it in Brilliance. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to spray the backs of these with 505 spray and see if that holds them in place any better. I'm not sure whether it will or not. So just give my can a shake, and obviously do this in a well ventilated room. So I'm going to bring this in and lay this, and obviously now I can see where the one underneath is. So that's my guide for placement. So I'm just going to do the other 2. Make sure I've got them on the spraying, obviously the back side, and position this over, because obviously I can see the one underneath. I've no idea whether this is going to stick or not, but if I can just get it to hold in place so I can flip it over once it's flat. See, that one moved. I can give it a good press down and hope it holds in place. So just going to press down so that hopefully this will stay in place underneath. I don't want to use tape, you see, because I don't want to, because I've got no margin of material, I'd have to be taping across where it's going to stitch, and I don't want to get stitching going over, you know, masking tape. So I'm trying to avoid doing that. So I'm going to put this back in the machine. I've just realised I've not moved the microphone again. Because my sewing machine is at one end of a very long bench and the overhead camera is at the other, I have to move the microphone, and I've just realised that I've not moved it back to talk to you. So basically, you should have been able to see what I was doing. Now it's back in the machine. I'm going to put the foot down and I'm going to stitch the last step and see what happens. They all appear to still be in the right place. Okay, so that's finished. So just to say, the actual total stitch time for stitching these 3 designs was 10 minutes on my machine, and there's only 4 steps. So if you were only doing one, you'd crank it out really quickly, and obviously if you were filling a hoop up to do more, it would take a bit longer. But it's a really, really simple design to stitch out. So I'm just going to go back over to the other desk now and get these out of the hoop. Okay, and I've remembered to bring my microphone back over this time, so you should be able to hear me. So because I was using a water-soluble stabiliser and it's, you know, a bit flimsy, I tightened my hoop quite tight. So I'm just going to use this little thing that came with my sewing machine just to help me undo the screw on the hoop. Take these out. So this is what I've got. So like I say, I was quite wasteful with my positioning, but I just wanted to try it. So this should just tear away now. Obviously I've got 2 layers here because I doubled up. This is the kind of stuff that you can do freestanding lace with. And that's the reason I used it, was so that, just get rid of those little threads. Because I didn't know whether I'd be able to pull tearaway stabiliser out of this tiny little, you know, gap all the way around. So let me just get these out of here. So that's all pulling away nicely. And it's not really leaving any residue around the outside, which is what my idea was for using this rather than tear away or cut away. So if I just snip the stitches, got a couple of stray stitches there. And then I've got a little cup of water here. I'm just going to put my finger in and dip it on any of the edges where, if there is any stabiliser, but it's all torn out nicely actually. So there are the 3 designs. So just to recap, so I use faux leather that's got like a fabric backing, and I use this sparkly vinyl, which again has got a fabric backing. So it's sewable vinyl. I think sometimes they call it marine vinyl. It's not HTV, it's not heat transfer vinyl. And then I used this water soluble. And you can see, you know, to cut 3, it's not taken much up from the scraps that I was using. And then it's a case of just putting, you know, a key ring on them and fastening them. So it doesn't give you any positioning for snaps, but basically I'm going to fold that over and I'm just going to punch a hole. So I'm going to fold this over towards the back to that row of stitching where the circle is, like so. And then I'm going to punch a hole right the way through and see if I can fasten these with the snaps that I've got. I don't know whether, they should be okay, they should go through here. So I'm going to put a snap here and a snap here and then snap them together. Okay, so I'm going to do one quickly. So basically I'm going to fold this over. I'm using my Stampin' Up! Stampin' Pierce mat, and I'm going to punch a hole centrally through both layers, like so, using the tool that came with the kit. I need a prong to go through from front to back, and then I need one of these male or female. I have shown how to use this in the past. And then I'm going to slide that into the dish and give it a good press. So that's 1/2 of the snap on. So now I need to push the other one through the hole that's down here somewhere. Just push it down with your fingers so that you get, you know, as much prong through as possible. And I want the opposite one of these now, which I think is that one. And then again, I'm going to slide this into the dish, press, slide my little key ring hook on, and then see if this works. snap them together. Okay, so I've just bent this ever so slightly because it's a bit too heavy-handed. So I'm just going to try and push it back into shape so that it will snap into place. So that's one done. And I'll do the others and then I'll show you at the end. Okay, so here they are. So I've put a white snap on that one, a lilac one on that one, and a black on that one. When you're doing your snaps and you've got them in the clamp, just don't be so heavy-handed like I was, because you can bend the inside bit out of shape. But I just use a little pair of like jewellery pliers and just bent it back to be circular, and then it will snap together again. So they're nice and secure. These rings might be marginally too small for the width of this, but I think they'll be okay. I could take them out, and I've got some bigger book rings, but I think they'll be fine. So that's the project for today. I hope you liked it. Please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. And there's the backs of them. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.